There's a particular kind of pain that people struggle to explain. It doesn't come from insults, arguments, or open hostility. In fact, it often arrives through silence. Someone stops replying, eye contact disappears, conversations grow shorter. Eventually, you realize something unsettling. You are still present, but no longer acknowledged. Being ignored creates a strange psychological experience because nothing explicit has happened, yet everything feels different. No one declared a conflict. Ignoring someone erases clarity entirely. It places the human mind in a space where it must interpret silence without guidance. That ambiguity is precisely what makes being ignored so psychologically disturbing. Human beings evolved as intensely social creatures. For most of human history, belonging to a group was not simply comforting, it was necessary for survival. Being accepted meant protection, shared resources, and cooperation. Being excluded often meant danger. Our brains still carry this ancient wiring. Modern neuroscience shows that social exclusion activates the same neural regions associated with physical pain, particularly the anterior cingulate cortex. In other words, the brain processes social rejection almost the same way it processes injury. But being ignored creates an even stranger signal. Instead of telling the brain, "You are rejected," it sends a more confusing message. "You might not exist here at all." The mind is left struggling to interpret whether it has done something wrong, whether the other person is upset, or whether it has somehow become invisible. This uncertainty activates one of the mind's most uncomfortable states, social ambiguity. Humans are excellent at interpreting clear signals. Anger can be understood, criticism can be processed, even rejection can eventually be accepted. But silence forces the brain to search endlessly for explanations. When someone is ignored, the mind begins constructing possibilities. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe they secretly dislike me. Maybe they are angry. Maybe I am not important. These thoughts rarely stay neutral. They tend to drift towards self-criticism because the brain is wired to assume responsibility for threats to belonging. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as the need to belong mechanism. When that need feels threatened, the mind begins scanning memory for mistakes. A small interaction becomes replayed repeatedly. A harmless comment begins to feel like a potential offense. The brain becomes a detective searching for clues that might explain the silence. The irony is that the explanation is often simple. The other person may be distracted, overwhelmed, or emotionally unavailable, but the mind rarely accepts simple explanations when belonging feels uncertain. Instead, it creates narratives that amplify insecurity. This is why being ignored can quietly damage self-perception, not because silence contains direct criticism, but because it allows the imagination to supply endless criticism on its own. Another reason ignoring hurts so deeply is that it challenges one of the most fundamental psychological needs, recognition. Recognition is the confirmation that our presence matters. From childhood, humans develop a sense of identity partly through being seen by others. A child smiles and looks toward a parent. When the parent smiles back, the child receives a powerful signal. You exist, and your presence matters. Over thousands of small interactions like this, people construct their sense of self. Philosopher Charles Horton Cooley described this process as the looking glass self. We partially understand who we are through the reactions of others. When people respond to us, we receive feedback about our identity. But when someone deliberately withholds acknowledgement, the mirror disappears. Without reflection, the mind struggles to stabilize its sense of social position. This is why ignoring someone can feel more unsettling than criticism. Criticism still recognizes the person. Ignoring them removes recognition altogether. Experiments in social psychology have repeatedly demonstrated this effect through a simple activity known as the cyberball experiment. Participants believe they are playing a virtual ball-tossing game with two other players. At first, the ball is shared equally. Then, the two other players begin passing the ball only to each other, completely excluding the participant. Within minutes, people report strong feelings of sadness, anger, and even shame. What makes the experiment remarkable is how quickly exclusion creates distress. Even when participants know the situation is artificial, the brain reacts to social invisibility with surprising intensity because it interprets exclusion as a threat to belonging. Ignoring someone also produces a unique form of psychological power. In social dynamics, the person who withdraws attention often gains control over emotional uncertainty. Attention functions like a form of currency in human relationships. When someone offers attention, they signal interest, respect, or connection. When they remove it, the sudden absence creates imbalance. The ignored person, they begin seeking explanations or reassurance. They might attempt to re-establish connection through messages, apologies, or attempts to repair a problem that may not even exist. This shift creates a subtle asymmetry of power. The one who withholds attention becomes the gatekeeper of acknowledgement. In extreme cases, this dynamic can turn into a form of emotional manipulation, sometimes described as silent treatment. Unlike open confrontation, the silent treatment does not communicate specific complaints. Instead, it punishes the other person with uncertainty and social isolation. Studies in relationship psychology show that prolonged silent treatment can increase anxiety, confusion, and emotional distress in the targeted partner. The brain interprets prolonged silence not just as conflict, but as potential abandonment, and abandonment has historically been one of the greatest threats to human survival. Yet the pain of being ignored does not come only from evolutionary instincts. It also touches something deeply existential about human identity. At a fundamental level, people want to feel that their presence influences the world around them. They want to know that their words, actions, and emotions create some form of response. When someone is ignored, that sense of influence collapses. It produces a disturbing feeling of social weightlessness. Imagine speaking and receiving no response. Imagine entering a room and no one acknowledging you. The experience creates a subtle psychological distortion where a person begins to question their significance in that environment. This is why ignoring can feel more painful than rejection. Rejection says, "I see you, but I do not accept you." Ignoring says something more unsettling. Your presence does not register at all. That message threatens a person's sense of agency within the social world. Agency is the feeling that your actions produce consequences. If your presence produces no response, your mind begins questioning whether your actions matter. Interestingly, the mind often reacts to this threat in one of several predictable ways. Some people respond with anxiety. They attempt to restore connection quickly, apologizing or seeking reassurance in order to remove the uncertainty. Others react with anger. Anger functions as a psychological defense against feelings of invisibility. By expressing anger, a person reasserts their presence and forces acknowledgement. And some people respond with withdrawal. After repeated experiences of being ignored, they may stop attempting connection altogether. This reaction is particularly concerning because it can lead to a gradual reduction in social confidence. The person begins expecting invisibility and may unconsciously behave in ways that reinforce that expectation. Over time, a single experience of being ignored can evolve into a broader belief about social value. Instead of thinking, "This person ignored me," the mind begins thinking, "People ignore me." Once that belief forms, it becomes self-reinforcing. The brain selectively notices moments that confirm the narrative, while overlooking moments of acceptance. Despite how painful ignoring can be, the experience also reveals something important about the structure of human relationships. Attention is not simply a courtesy, it is a psychological signal of value. Every time someone listens, responds, or acknowledges another person's presence, they reinforce a small but meaningful social bond. These bonds accumulate over time and form the invisible architecture of belonging. When attention disappears, that architecture begins to feel unstable. This is why even brief moments of acknowledgement can repair emotional tension quickly. A simple response, a small gesture of recognition, or a brief conversation can restore the sense that one's presence matters. In contrast, prolonged silence creates emotional distance far faster than direct disagreement. Disagreement still involves engagement. Silence removes engagement entirely. In the end, the psychology of being ignored reveals a powerful truth about human nature. People do not simply want to be liked, they want to be seen. They want their presence to create a response in the social world around them. Rejection may hurt because it closes a door, but ignoring hurts in a different way. It makes the person standing at the door wonder whether they were ever visible in the first place.